So hey guys, welcome to a new video. Normally I don't really do a whole film series over the course of one video where I give you my thoughts on the whole series and things like that. But since it's been a while since I've done that, and since there's news recently, or not recently, I'd say about 2 months ago at this point when I did this video, um, rumors have been surfacing of a Lethal Weapon 5 eventually happening with Richard Donner coming back to direct and everything. And since I love the first Lethal Weapon so much, and I've rewatched it so many times, I really never got to see the sequels very often. I think I saw each one once over the course of a long period of time. So I never really saw them collectively together to kind of really evaluate kind of what were the better and worse installments and things like that. So in this video, I am talking about all four of the first Lethal Weapon movies, if we do indeed get a fifth one soon too. So this is a video is all about my personal thoughts on these first four films. Obviously, with time constrictions, I won't be able to go into deep detail on all four films, but I am going to give you kind of my brief positives and negatives of each installment. So let's get talking about those. So the first Lethal Weapon, you guys, I love that movie. It's definitely the perfect example of a great buddy cop film. It kind of is Shane Black / Richard Donner's invention of the buddy cop formula. Maybe, yeah, so maybe there were earlier films that used that idea, but the way Lethal Weapon did it in the first film was very different, very unique. It still stands out even in 2020. There's just a lot of things about that first Lethal Weapon film I think are very good. It's funny when it needs to be. It gets dark when it needs to be. There's things about how crazy and how scary suicide can be with Riggs's character after losing his wife and things like that, and just how difficult it is to retire when it comes to Murtaugh's character by Danny Glover. So for my big positive of this film, I think it's just an amazing buddy cop film with two interesting lead characters. You really feel for Murtaugh. He just wants to retire, get out of the police force business. You have Riggs, who needs work, who is on a suicide watch of sorts from the police department. He lost his wife tragically, and so there's all these things going on with him where he's really willing to be daring with his police force tasks and things like that. But for my negative of the first Lethal Weapon film, there's certain moments, and maybe it was just the fact that it was made in the 80s and things like that, where some of the characters felt superhuman. There's like a scene where Riggs and the Gary Busey villain in the movie, they like charge through a fence and they have like no harm done to them and things like that. There's a lot of moments like that throughout the movie where the certain characters just feel kind of superhuman. But besides that negative, for the most part, I absolutely love this first Lethal Weapon film. Most of my love for this franchise comes from this first installment, and I think it's just an amazing example of what you can do with a buddy cop film if you have the right script in mind. Now we get to Lethal Weapon 2. I'm sure a lot of you are going to disagree with my opinion on this one. But for me personally, I thought a lot of the Lethal Weapon sequels really weren't very good. And maybe that's why I've only seen each one once over the course of my life until now. It wasn't until just recently where I saw each sequel for a second time in my life. But for my positives of Lethal Weapon 2, I think the stunts are bigger. They go bigger with the action scenes. They clearly had a bigger budget to work with based on the success of that first Lethal Weapon movie. And even if they didn't have a bigger budget, they made it feel like they did. They made more of the dollars count this time. They were able to go bigger with some of the things that they weren't able to do in the first film. Probably just because maybe the time they made the first Lethal Weapon movie, they didn't think it was going to be as big as it was. But there was a lot of things about it where you could tell it was a sequel, so they feel the need to go bigger and things like that. They kind of do show how Riggs has kind of moved on from his suicide. He really doesn't think about that stuff anymore. We have, Murtaugh, who's still kind of thinking about retirement, even though that's downplayed a little bit more now that he seems to be needed in the police force a little bit more now. But for my negatives of Lethal Weapon 2, and just kind of in general for the sequels really too for this comment, but I thought Mel Gibson's character was kind of too cutesy this time around because he's not that suicidal, daring police officer anymore. They kind of had to go a different route with him. I thought the cutesy route, I don't even know if you can call it cutesy, but like you can definitely tell they had to go a different route than what they did in the first movie. But as a result, it makes for a more boring character to me. And I also thought the addition of Joe Pesci was just super annoying, and unfortunately, we get to see him in all the sequels. But he really is annoying here. He's like, "Hey, hey, hey! I need a gun! I need a gun! I need a gun, guys! I need a gun! I need a gun! I need a gun!" And it's just like, get away from me. And so there's just a lot of things with the Joe Pesci character that I thought were really annoying. When I get to the fourth one, I do kind of have something positive to say about the character for that film, but in this first movie, I'm like, oh my god, and I'm sure I got to deal with him in the sequels, and unfortunately, I do. Um, and so there's just a lot of things about the second film in particular where they start doing that in all the sequels, and unfortunately, it kind of loses its track from that first one as a result. You can definitely tell they were trying to go goofier now at this point in the franchise. Then we get to Lethal Weapon 3. This is my personal least favorite installment of the franchise. Even though it does show the darker side of the police force this time around, and the addition of Rene Russo, if I can pronounce the name right, Rene Russo. There we go. The addition of her character I thought was very nice. It was definitely kind of cool to see kind of a Riggs female equivalent added to the franchise. Like I said, it does show kind of the darker side of the police force with like the villain they use this time around. Unfortunately, more Joe Pesci this time around, which didn't help the movie for me. I also thought this film had a hard time getting started. There's just a lot of moments where they lose their badges, they get them back. They do something really bad, they get their badges back randomly for doing this random good thing. There's just a lot of times in the movie where it just has a hard time getting started with where it really wants to go. And like I said, that addition of Joe Pesci again, based off that second film, I definitely did not want to see more of him, unfortunately. But we did get more of him this time around. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to give ratings for this. So Lethal Weapon 1, I would give that a 9 out of 10. Lethal Weapon 2, I would give that a 7.5 out of 10. Then for Lethal Weapon 3, I would give that a 7 out of 10. Um, so, like I said, it shows the darker side of the police force. The addition of Rene Russo, if I can ever pronounce her name right, was nice. But unfortunately, the more Joe Pesci moments and having a hard time getting started was something that kind of wore the film down for me. Then we get to Lethal Weapon 4. I actually like this installment probably the best of the sequels, if that means anything. But like I said, I think the sequels for most of the Lethal Weapon films aren't that amazing anyway, so I'll take that with a grain of salt. Um, so I guess this is the closest we've got to the first film that I've liked the most, I guess. So for Lethal Weapon 4, the addition of Chris Rock I thought was very funny. I liked his character of Butters. The fact that he's this new son-in-law of Murtaugh, and Murtaugh doesn't want to accept this right away, and things like that, and it's kind of revealed at a very funny moment in the movie, and things like that. The film also does display how the team is kind of a family now. And how they kind of have to all get along, and they kind of have gotten along and become better people because of getting to know each other and things like that. So I like that theme. It's a nice little wrap up for the franchise if this was indeed kind of the last installment of the franchise. But like I said, there's rumors of a fifth one eventually happening if we get it. But I like the message of family and how the team's working together as a family and views each other as a family now. So I like that theme. And like I said, the addition of Chris Rock made the film a lot funnier than if it didn't have him and things like that. For my negative of Lethal Weapon 4, though, and once again, why it's still not as good as that first Lethal Weapon film, some of the martial arts tone that they go with in this film because of with Jet Li being in there as the villain and with the whole I think it's like a Chinese immigrant problem that's going on in the movie and things like that. I thought it was a very clashing tone with the whole martial art thing going on in this movie. And there's also a lot of slow moments. I feel like it takes a very long time to get back to the action scenes again. It takes a long time to get to the bigger Riggs moments, the bigger Murtaugh moments. And like I said, that martial arts tone does kind of get in the way at some points. But Lethal Weapon 4, I'm going to give that one a 7.5 out of 10. Though it's the same rating as Lethal Weapon 2, I think there's more admirable qualities of that fourth film, and it makes for a better viewing experience than the second film for me. And going back to Joe Pesci's character, there is a scene that I can't reveal too much here, where it really does kind of bring the series together, and it really does show that he wasn't just the annoying guy this time around. Like, he really was kind of this addition to the team and things like that. So there's a moment he gets towards the end of this movie with him and Riggs alone that I think really kind of makes up for all the annoying times he had in those earlier installments for me. Still would have preferred his character not to be in the franchise, or just for him to give a different direction to what his character was doing in this series. But it was kind of a redeeming moment for me when it came to that moment. So Lethal Weapon 1, once again, 9 out of 10. Lethal Weapon 2, 7.5 out of 10 for me. Lethal Weapon 3 would get a 7 out of 10. Lethal Weapon 4 would get a 7.5 out of 10. Good franchise overall, but like I said, that first film really is the best for me. I'm still kind of shocked. I hear people compare it. The second one is compared to the first one and things like that. I don't think that's the case at all. Lethal Weapon 1 easily is the best installment of this franchise. And if we do get a fifth one, I really do hope it happens. I think Richard Donner is 90 now, so hopefully it'll still happen. And I think I did hear somewhere that both Mel Gibson and Danny Glover are more open to the idea now than they were several years ago. So if we do get a fifth one, hopefully it's interesting. I could see them having, with Murtaugh, or Murtaugh's grandson maybe being a police officer now, or a daughter, or whatever he had. And then I think Riggs did have a son in the fourth one. So if he becomes a police officer and gets in trouble and brings the two of them along or something like that, I could see them going that route. But I really like the first film the best in this franchise, you guys. The sequels are all great, I guess. If you do have to see the sequels, probably the fourth one. That was probably the best installment for me of the four for the sequels. And I guess I'll see you guys back here for the next video.